Alrighty, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here on this beautiful afternoon. I actually apologize that you're all here in attendance for the sake of this, but in any event, the time is now 5:32, and today is April 28th, and on the agenda for this work session is we are going to discuss refining and possible amendments to the short-term rental ordinance. So the overview of at least this workshop is going to be to review the preliminary results from the community discussion that was held a few weeks back, and then the council will take the time to reflect and review how that process went, to review some of the feedback that residents provided, and then we'll take public comment at the end and hear any additional requests or recommendations for moving forward. So with that being said, I'll let Donna kick us off.
Good afternoon. I guess it's almost evening. What I've done is put together a short-term rental ordinance discussion data PowerPoint presentation. So the short-term rental discussion was held on March 4th. 2025. It was a discussion about short-term rentals. It was held at the community center, and it was hosted by the Center for Mediation and Collaboration. The goal statement was to afford residents the opportunity to articulate their point of view with respect to certain aspects of the ordinance as drafted, particularly with regard to what they believe the crafters got right and where they recommend that improvements or changes can be made. So basically, that was what the whole idea of the roundtable discussion was about. So this summary was prepared by Carolyn Mark and Tricia Driscoll, who are both part of the Center of Mediation and Collaboration. So this was sent to us. This is their data that they collected, and this was sent to us from both Carolyn and Tricia. So the summary. At the request of the Narragansett Town Council, Carolyn Mark and Tricia Driscoll from the Center of Mediation and Collaboration, RI, facilitated a community discussion regarding the short-term rental ordinance, which had been crafted but not implemented for the purpose of garnering input from members of the public regarding what, in their view, the crafters got right and what changes, if any, they would recommend be made regarding certain aspects of the ordinance. The output of the discussion will be used to inform the next steps in the ordinance review process, slated to be a community workshop to be held at a later date, which is today. So this is the workshop. Members of the public, for which there were approximately 90 people, circulated through 5 small group discussions concerning 5 core questions. A parking lot was also provided for comments not specifically related to the 5 core questions. Below are some key themes that emerged, but please note there are some overlap across sections, and not all comments are necessarily captured in these key themes. Specific and comprehensive feedback can be found in the verbatim write-up on the flip charts and comments included at the end of the document. The original flip chart sheets have been also preserved. So they have the sheets preserved. I did include in the PowerPoint all the comments from all the charts that were written that particular evening. And I'm not going to read all of those, but we have handouts of the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so in their opinion, the general overreaching themes were, while some believe the ordinance is sufficient and necessary as is, others have questions, concerns, and recommendations for improvement, including, for example, streamlining the requirements so the ordinance doesn't overwhelm the town or property owners, taking into account seasonality and taking seasonality into account. There's a desire for transparency and an articulated rationale for all decisions that are made with respect to the short-term ordinances. They also found that there is interest in creating alignment with existing laws and rules and regulations, rather than creating a new requirement specific to short-term rentals. There are concerns regarding how all aspects of the ordinance will get enforced, by whom, at what cost to the town, if fines and fees are related to the ordinance, don't cover all the costs, and how to determine what is an appropriate fee or fine. To accomplish the goals of the short-term ordinance, but to ease the transition for current residents and property owners, there are questions as to whether these goals could be accomplished utilizing grandfathering, attrition, or limited growth. So those were the general overreaching themes that they came based on all the themes that came forward through the questions. So these are the themes that emerged for specific to each one of the discussion areas. As you remember, there were 5 areas, and these are, thank you. Probably easier for me to read it here. We would prefer that if you wait until after, if you could just. I'm sorry?
Sure. Sure.
Have you teased out the comments that came from non-residents who don't live here and that are affected by this, or are these comments from all the participants, including the non-resident property owners?
This is strictly comments from the Center of Mediation based on the charts that they took with them that evening. It's everyone who participated.
And
Yes.
it will be teased out at like additional workshops to follow.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so applicability and general requirements. Now, I'm sorry, if I'm going to read it up there, I don't need my glasses. If I'm going to read it here, I have to put my glasses on. The ordinance establishes the permitting requirement, a minimum number of nights, lack of transferability, and the expiration upon sale or transfer, and inspection requirements. In your view, what about these sections did the crafters get right and are important to preserve? What revisions, if any, would you recommend be made and why? So that was the question number 1 that was given to everyone at the tables. And they found that some of the themes were, does the town have the legal ability to limit short-term rentals? If so, who decides and based on what? There is an interest in transparency and a sound rationale. Does it make sense to have limits and requirements for different seasons, et cetera? Example, May to September and October to April. A 7-day rental is much more challenging in the off-season, is what they found that people. May there be public purpose in differentiating between owner-occupied and those that are not regarding minimum nights, fees, transferability, and renewals? Might there be public purpose in differentiating between owner-occupied, Narragansett residents, Rhode Island residents, and out-of-state residents? May there be public purpose in differentiating between residential neighborhoods and properties that are located in the business district? So these were things that were written and people had some concerns about and some things that they talked about on the charts. What is the right balance between, What is the right balance between ensuring safety and having inspections requirements that are too onerous for the owners? There's an interest in having transferability clarified and or reconsidered. How were the fees set? Will fees cover the cost of implementing and enforcing the ordinance, or will additional taxpayer funds be required to cover a gap? How to balance the cost of the fees for owners while also ensuring that resources exist to pay for the ordinance implementation? Is there a public purpose to consider grandfathering in existing short-term rentals, including pre-existing rental agreements, and managing growth through future ordinance limits? Requirements regarding parking and bedroom size don't necessarily reflect the reality of the shared parking lots in older cottages? Is there an opportunity to align these requirements with requirements established elsewhere rather than create a new, unique standard? For example, if a bedroom is considered a legal bedroom, would it qualify as one under the ordinance, no matter what its size? So those were the comments and the themes that they found throughout number one of the first question. Do you want to, no, okay.
No, I was just going to say, if it's possible to do like a high-level overview. I don't think you have to read every single bullet, unless anyone in the public makes a big
Would you
thing
prefer
about
me,
it.
not- I mean,
I think a lot of the information's in here, and you, by all means, go through it. This is your presentation. I'm just providing a recommendation that it is available to the public for review, so if there's any particular highlights that you want to cover, but if you want to just read everything, that's fine, too.
well, I actually, when I was going through this, I was looking for specific highlights, but I think all the information is so pertinent to that question that I thought it was important that everyone hear what they found as their themes.
Yep.
I mean, if you want, I could pick and choose some, but I thought that it would be
No,
better.
that's all right. You go ahead.
I mean,
was just
there's really
providing
only 5, so we're on 2, so
Yeah,
that's a
all right.
good thing.
Yep, no worries. Thank you.
Okay, so number 2 was permitting limits. The ordinance established limits to the numbers of permits that shall be issued. In your view, what aspects of this section did its crafters get right and are important to preserve in the spirit or in actual number? And what revisions, if any, would you recommend be made and why? Okay, so the themes that they thought came out of this second question: does the town have the legal ability to limit short-term rentals? If so, who decides and based on what? There's an interest in transparency and sound rationale. You could see that some of these are in the general overview that, they came out with general based on what they were finding here. How to balance the need of residential community with the owner's property rights. Need to consider how to handle already agreed upon leases in the event of a transfer or permit renewal issue. How to create a fair and equitable application process. Might permits with specific requirements and enforcement address the major concerns and limit short-term rentals without imposing limits? Might there be a public purpose in grandfathering in existing short-term rentals? Might future limits be achieved through attrition, or what basis would future limits be set? Might there be public purpose in giving residents priority in the permitting process? Why reduce the number of permits over time? How will it be determined fairly who keeps their permits and who doesn't? A cap on growth could be another approach. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. So based on the comments, that's what they pulled out of those comments. I need to do this. Okay. So number 3 was permit, insurance, expiration, and renewal. The question for those who were not there was that the ordinance establishes that once all residence requirements are met, the building official shall issue permits within established limits, and that all permits shall expire on August 31st and must be renewed according to the established time frame. In your view, what about this section did the crafters get right and are important to preserve? What revisions, if any, would you recommend be made and why? So what they found was that some of the questions were, might there be a public purpose in allowing families to transfer properties and permits? Might there be a public purpose in grandfathering in existing properties and auto renewals when there are no issues? Might short-term rental period be a calendar year instead of expiring on August 31st? Concerns about getting a permit 1 year but not the next. Is there a balance to be struck between frequency and cost of inspections? Might current landlords have the opportunity to renew before the new applicants on the wait list? Might renewal be easier when there's no infractions and inspections are complete? Need for clarity on inspection criteria and the time frame allowed to correct infractions. So those were what was pulled out of what people had written on the chart for that particular question. Two more. So the fourth one was operational requirements. Oh, sorry. The ordinance establishes certain operational requirements designed to protect residential character, to ensure that renters are fully informed of rental requirements and responsibilities and are provided contact information. In your view, what about this section did the crafters get right and are important to preserve? What revisions, if any, would you recommend and why? So some of the concerns, it was some consensus that the crafters of this section got it mostly right. There is some agreement surrounding the importance of providing short-term renters with the expectations of neighborly conduct ahead of the beginning of the rental, regardless of time. Is 4 hours response time reasonable? Revisit excluded activities and how this would be enforced. Do certain activities need to be excluded or allowable as long as they comply with other restrictions? If they're excluded from rentals, should they also be excluded from homeowners? To whom it is made known who the local representative is for a property? To whom is it made known who the local representative is for a property? The town, adjacent property owners. Revisit the purpose of the extensive posting requirements. Concern about what it means to preserve residential character. Is this non-inclusive language? What is the role of a host versus the town officials versus the police in responding to, halting, and preventing conduct? What is the role of the town in calling hosts 24/7 for non-serious issues? Ordinance should align with other legal contexts. For example, if a bedroom is a legal bedroom, its square footage shouldn't matter. Certain prohibitions, such as the color or paint color of the house, seems like an overreach. And last question that was asked, that was on the table, was fee and fines. The ordinance establishes resident and non-resident application and permit fees, as well as schedule of the fines for minor and major violations. In your view, what about this section did its crafters get right and are important to preserve? What revisions, if any, would you recommend and be made and why? Concerns that fees, which seem high to some relative other towns, won't support the true cost of the ordinance, and that true cost will be borne by the residents. Conversely, if there's excess fees, where would the money go? Concerns about equity versus Rhode Island residents versus Narragansett residents. Need for strict leases, enforcement by landlords, and heavy fines. Possibly, oh my God, can you say, how do you say that word? All right, with the seriousness of the infraction, will there be an appeals process for fines and possible revocation of permits? How high should fines be for not abiding by the short-term ordinance? How will complaints be investigated to determine the validity of the complaints? Will there be compliance officer investigation? To the extent that there are fines, will there be duplicative of the other fines, such as violating a noise ordinance? How to streamline the application and permit process to make it efficient, cost-effective, and less burdensome? Should the ordinance requirements be in line with online travel agencies such as Vrbo and Airbnb in terms of what qualifies as a contract and what is included? So The rest of it, the rest of the PowerPoint presentation is actual comments that were made by the residents as they circled through the tables. And these were all the sheets, all the charts, and this is everything that was written. We can get the actual charts if we need be, but this has been, they just took everything that was on the chart and put it in on here. And so you can see it continues on, and it talks about each question and what the comments were. I'm not going to go through them all. You should have a PowerPoint, but if you look at them, this is everything that was put out by the residents at the table and at the forum. So with that being said, I'm turning it over to you.
Oh, well, thank you, Donna. And I do want to thank you for your assistance and collaboration in putting this together, this very important community discussion. Part of the reason why I did not vote in favor of the rescinding of the ordinance was because I recognized how much time and effort, work had gone into the creation of this ordinance, and I greatly valued the feedback from the community. I don't think any council member did not value the feedback from the community, but at least from where I sit, that's my perspective. And then a special thank you to Carolyn Mark and Tricia Driscoll for their collaboration in putting this discussion together and compiling these results. As a member of the council, I do look at the results, and I think some really good points have also been brought up as well. I, too, was a political science major, and I look at survey results and not only the content in which it's being shared, but how it's being shared and what the makeup of those results look like. I do understand that the community discussion was to really look at and try to capture the overall themes and values of a short-term rental ordinance, what an ideal ordinance would look like. And I think there's a lot of content in here. I think if we're able to, at a later workshop or an additional community discussion, really get down to like the specific core content of what it is that the residents would like to see. I think it's a fair point to say, again, I don't know, I admittedly was not there. But if we're able to capture better the responses from the residents or the resident landowners versus those out-of-towners who just may own property. And we're not trying to discredit anyone here, but it would be good to kind of highlight specific feedback from residents and resident landowners as well. And I think that's very important. I do think that there's a lot of good overlapping themes. Also, transparency and sound rationale seem to be in every aspect of this ordinance and the feedback that we had acquired. But, getting down to, a debate of the timing, the seasonality, 7 nights versus 3 nights, should it be, 7 days between Memorial Day and Labor Day and 3 in the off-season. I think that's going to be a debate for an additional work session at a later time. But I just want to thank you and all of the residents who came out for that very important community discussion, because I think this really sets our footing, but by no means is it 100% of the way there. That in regards to aligning on expectations for the town and for the council, that this sets our footing, but where we go from here will probably be an additional workshop or community session, a community center or a town hall discussion where we can really get into the content and really engage with what the residents would like to see, if anything, because I do appreciate one of the questions, or at least how it's framed, and again, framing and the order in which questions are asked can also influence the feedback as well. I do appreciate the opportunity for those who responded to provide feedback on where they think the ordinance got it right. And again, that was my belief when I did not vote in favor of rescinding the ordinance, was that I believed that there was parts within the ordinance that was working, and how can we better improve those areas that need to be improved. But I will, I'm very interested to hear the rest of the council's take on how the community discussion went, any particular feedback on the presentation that Donna shared, or any initial thoughts before reaching out to the public.
I think that this was a great workshop. For instance, I've gotten emails from both sides of the argument conceding to several issues regarding nights and certain things. So I'm impressed by that. It started a conversation. People are actually talking with each other, which is very nice. As we know, this ordinance is unenforceable as it is right now. We need to make adjustments to it to get it to an enforceable part. So there's nothing working in this ordinance right now because we can't do anything with it. So I think it's important that we continue the conversation and try to find that middle ground. Councilor
Torrealde.
Thank you to everybody who came out on March 4th, as well as coming out to this event tonight to discuss the short-term rental ordinance. I'm grateful to Carolyn and Tricia for running the session on March 4th. They've given us some great starting points on where to target our series of workshops. And I look forward to engaging in this dialogue with both the council and the public as well. Thank you.
So if I could just say that I think the whole idea was bringing the community together to be able to have discussion, people see other points of view, other sides of the story. I think that in that way it was successful. I do think that we did do a exit survey, which I want to share with you. I think the majority of the people who were there found it. The people who did respond to our survey found that it was. One of the questions was, what would you like to see more of this type of discussion take place in our community? I think you could see the results is somewhat interested, very interested, extremely interested is more dominant than people who were not interested in all and not so interested. So I think it was good that people felt like their voices were being heard. And I believe that they felt like they could actually express themselves and hear other points of view, and I thought that was a great thing. We also asked, did you find value in this community discussion? And again, I think the results, shows that most people did think that there was some value in doing what we did. And so I think it was successful, definitely successful in that way. And again, I want to thank everyone who came out. I just sitting there that night or standing there that evening and watching people talk and seeing people who probably never spoke to other person, that before, and they were talking and exchanging ideas and having conversations. We tried to move everyone around. We left it pretty open so that people could take, do their thing, and we didn't want to assign. We talked about assigning seats. We decided not to do that. We wanted people to be able to circulate around and meet other people and talk in different groups, and that's why we left it kind of open. Again, like Alex said, we're looking at this. We're going to go back and look at it, see how it was done. I mean, of course, there's always ways that we can improve things, but I think all in all, I'm very pleased with the way it turned out.
And I appreciate you sharing that feedback, and the exit survey results are positive, and I would be interested, I know the data's not in front of us here, I'd be interested to know how many actual residents or what was the total number of people there was.
I believe it was
for the turnout.
37.
That in total?
That responded to our.
That responded, yes, but I just wasn't sure if
Yeah, I believe it
you
was
had a number.
I believe it was 37 people responded out of the 90.
Do you know how many in total approximately were in attendance for the community
Everyone,
discussion?
because we took it off the email of people who.
No, I mean, do you know approximately if it was like 100 people were in attendance for the community discussion?
90. There were 90 people.
There were 90. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, and there were other questions to be clear, there were 2 other questions on the survey that were just, you could just add a comment, and I don't even remember what they were. I might have it. But it was just too involved. It was just something like, what would you suggest? Would you like to do this again? Or what would you suggest could be done differently? It wasn't anything pertaining more, to the actual thing. It was just more suggestion for us to help us for the next time what we would consider doing. And so because it was an answer, it just wasn't going to be, but we have that available. If anybody wants it, it's all available. We have all that results.
And again, in the spirit of calling back to my education, just my political science background, and maybe my own sense of biasness. I understand that we all as individuals have a level of biasness and we have our own viewpoints. So I understand, at least based on what was shared, that there was one scribe per table, and it was up to that one individual to, was that not how it happened? Okay.
So basically what happened was there were charts on the table. People were asked to sit down and have a discussion, and then write on the chart. Anyone could write on the chart.
Anyone could write, okay.
Yes, and the only actual instruction was that if you agree with something that's on the chart, just place a check next to it. You didn't have to rewrite it.
Okay.
Okay?
Perfect. Thank you. Because that was literally where it's going to be. I wouldn't expect you to write down 100% of however I was feeling or any of the feedback that I was sharing, because that's like a limitation in regards to translating what somebody else is thinking. That if I myself am writing everything down, I have the ability to provide that feedback, and it sounds like that was the shared opportunity.
That was what the directions were.
Thank you. So with that being said, I'd be interested in opening up to the floor, and when you come up, I would encourage providing commentary on, if you were present at the workshop, I'd be very interested to hear what your thoughts and feedback were on it. Any recommendations on how we could improve workshops or work sessions moving forward regarding the short-term rental workshop, and anything in particular that that you would like to see in a new short-term rental ordinance as well. Just any additional thoughts. So Gail, please come forward. I have no idea. Where is the preference? Is it up here, or is it? I don't know what that is.
You just have a seat, that's fine.
Thank you for the question. And just please state your name and address.
Sure.
Thank you.
Gail Scowcroft, 19 Prospect Ave.
Does that microphone work?
It's on.
Okay, thank you.
It's on. Yeah, thank you. So unfortunately, I was out of the country and very disappointed I could not be at the workshop. And I'm not invalidating that people had a positive experience. However, your exit survey data is pretty meaningless. Only a third of the participants responded, and those participants were self-selected. So the people that had good feelings would most likely have completed that survey. So I'm just cautioning you. I don't know how well your people understand surveys. It's data, but it's not data that you can really rely on very heavily, because, again, only a third of the participants completed that survey, and it was a self-selection process.
Just in the microphone.
Self-selection means as people were leaving, they had an opportunity to complete that.
No, it was emailed.
Sent to all.
It was,
Well, the same thing. It was a self-selection process means you didn't have a random trial of any kind. It was people who wanted to complete the survey, completed the survey. So
Sure, I
in
mean, you
other
can't
words,
force anyone to take a survey.
No, you can't.
So
but-
that's just making the statement that all exit surveys are flawed in general,
Yes,
because
it-
you're
they-
normally going to provide a positive response
Yes.
or not.
Yes, but if you read about exit surveys, most likely it's the people that had a positive
Sure.
effect from it are going to be the ones that fill the survey out.
Sure, but I would prefer to at least have some sort of an indication, at least to some people in attendance. It's
Yeah.
better to have it than
Yeah,
to
as
not, right?
As I said, it's not a major deal. I just
Right.
wanted to caution you
I
as you
appreciate
go
it.
forward making decisions.
Absolutely, thank you.
So in terms of the short-term rental ordinance itself,
Mm-hmm.
I sat in this room through multiple meetings as the short-term rental ordinance was hammered out. The public, many of the public were able to speak and offer their opinions. And then that was in the first year, the first iteration of that short-term rental ordinance when it was the previous council. And then the council before yours took that ball and ran with it. And they hired attorneys that have the expertise in this arena, the DeSisto law firm, to help develop that ordinance. And then they hired Granicus, who is one of the national leaders in understanding the complexities of short-term rentals, to develop the ordinance, and then it was fact-checked by the attorneys. So we have a solid short-term rental ordinance that would stand the legal test of time. I understand there are property owners, some residents, some not residents, that might want to see some changes made, and I'm not opposed to seeing changes made. I'm not in that camp, but I do think that it's really important to understand the amount of work that went into those, and I have to say none of you were in those meetings, because I was in every one, and I know I never saw any of you in those meetings. So to wholesale want to throw out something that so many residents have already participated in is ill-founded, in my opinion. So I appreciate that you had this workshop. Again, I was really sorry that I wasn't there. But before changes are made, I'm really glad, President Menzies, that you are going to have another workshop so that residents can come. And I really think it's important that the residents and the resident property owners' voices are the voices that go into making this decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President, just one point of order on this. This will be posted on the town's website by tomorrow, and anyone here this evening that didn't get a copy, if you'd like it emailed to you, just a sheet of paper and a pen at the door, and we'll send them out to you in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone else wish to come forward to provide some feedback on the community discussion or what they would like to see in an ideal short-term rental ordinance? And please state your name and address.
Hi, Ron Catanzaro, 17 Atlantic Ave. I did participate, and it was good. I'll say that. Professionally run, no. I've done many of those in my profession as well and attended many of those, but I think it served the purpose. And I think you heard from people who didn't necessarily come out to all the meetings that, say, Gail went to, because a lot of people won't react until something is in front of them, and then they know they have to abide by it, and then all of a sudden they take an interest in it, and then they want to learn more and figure it out and kind of do that thing. So from that, it's good. I think all of you received an email from the NTRA today, and what we learned, because there were probably 4 or 5 members of the NTRA present, and we specifically scattered ourselves around, tried to get on tables with a lot of the Narragansett resident landlord owners as well, because those are the people we wanted to hear from too. And we had lots of discussions with them, and some even after the thing. And so we offered in our letter 3 places where you were looking for a summary, Mr. Menzies, of what the key things were coming from
Yes.
the residents. That letter, based on the 4 or 5 folks from the NTRA, was what we took back from the Narragansett resident landlords, and then some subsequent conversations with some of the NTRA board members and other Narragansett resident landlords as well. So I think that could help us in terms of moving forward as well, because there's some small changes in there, but I would reiterate what Gail said, is that there's been a lot of heavy, expensive legal work and work done by Granicus and DeSisto that we absolutely do have an ordinance that can be enforced and is workable. So I would be careful about town council members maybe making statements that, might not be 100% true on that type of thing. But, let's work from that base, look at those changes, and at least from our standpoint, if it helps you guys, that was some of the summaries from the Narragansett resident landlords. Okay.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Anyone else wish to come forward? And yes.
I'm John Hanley, 10 Wilderness Drive, sitting here, I don't know, getting toothpicks up my fingernails. I went to the thing in March, and I thought it was good. I said I thought it was good. You know, people on both sides sitting at the same table, you can be congenial, you can talk, you can try and understand. The only thing that I thought was really missing, and to me it is the most important facet of what this is how many people are you going to let stay in a house overnight or for 3 days or for a week? What are the occupancy limits going to be? I had done this a couple of years ago, and I did it actually yesterday again. I got on VRBO, and I got on, what's the other one? Airbnb. And I went through my neighborhood, the Village at Point Judith, and looked up everything that was for rent this summer. And it was very similar to the thing a couple of years ago, where basically 3 and 4 bedroom houses. I got houses that advertise in 16, 17 people a night, $6,000 a week, $1,000 a night. People are still making money regardless of all of this stuff. So I just hope this, whatever this turns out to be, it appears that there's going to be something. So I hope it's reasonable. I hope it limits occupancy to what is in the ordinance now, because that is fair. And certainly, I hope it's enforceable and you choose to enforce it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, please come forward. Good evening.
Evening. Hi. Rachel Laramie, 110 South Bay Drive. I was at the town hall meeting, and I thought it was a nice opportunity to have discussion with like-minded people and with people who had different viewpoints. You know, instead of sitting in a meeting, listening to people one by one, it was back and forth conversation, which I thought was beneficial. I live in town. I've lived here my entire life. My husband and I have saved up, worked really hard. We're both teachers. We've bought 2 properties, both in town, and we live a little nomadically between both and my mom's house, which is also in town. So a little like nomads, but 365 days in Narragansett. We have chosen to go the short-term route because we tried academic, and I never want to rent to people under 25, and that's what you get with that with students. Because I'm local, because I live in town, I care not only about the properties that I have heavily invested everything that I've earned into, but I'm also invested in the neighborhoods. I'm invested in the neighbors. Some of the neighbors are some of our best friends. Our neighbors even rented our house for their sister for a party last weekend. So it provides opportunity for things like that for people who don't want to stay in a hotel every time they travel. I know I don't want to stay in a hotel when I travel. You know, I want to have a kitchen and a bedroom that I can shut the door. I am very much on board with having an ordinance. I think as written, it's very long, it's very lengthy, and I'm a rule follower. I don't want to, I lose sleep at night if I know that I'm breaking rules. So I want something that I know that I can follow, that I can help other people follow. Because there's a whole group of us that are friends that all do this together, and we all help each other out. So, you know, if you're having houses that have 16, 17 people sleeping in a 3-bedroom house, I think that's wrong. I think weed out bad landlords through enforcement, but having something that is easier to enforce because it is more clear-cut is, I think, going to be more successful. A big theme that keeps coming up is the nightly minimum. I think having rules, regulations, fines, and stipulations for so many other aspects of short-term rentals almost negates the fact for having a minimum. Now, personally, I would never have a one-night minimum because I also think that attracts parties. But in the off-season, we get a lot of two-night rentals. We get a lot of URI parents coming to visit. We get funerals. We get baptisms. We get people coming in for road races, like the race last weekend. And so I think that there's, a need for either a flexible minimum or an off-season minimum. I would do 7 nights in the summer, but it doesn't always work for everybody. People don't always have the opportunity to take a whole week vacation. And as somebody who takes care of my own houses, sometimes we need a couple days to get in there and get some stuff done, schedule services to come and work on the houses. And if you have 7 nights back to back, that doesn't work. There's no downtime. So it's, I think, sometimes better to kind of have a few days midweek for it to clear out, if that works for your property. What I liked about the roundtable was that it gave people a voice to talk to people that they wouldn't normally have had the opportunity to interact with. I went with quite a few other resident landlords that I know. Some of them I know because I've been friends with them forever, and some I've met through these events. But I liked that it gave that opportunity, and I'd like to see more of that with short-term, but also with other aspects happening in town. That's it.
Thank you so much. Yes, please come forward.
Good evening.
Evening.
Joseph Volpe, 21 Harbor Island Road. I attended the roundtable. I think I was very complimentary at one of the meetings. In fact, I'm in a small group with Rachel. That's how we met. To give you a little bit of history, and it's a little bit overwhelming to talk about all the things that we need to talk about. So I just texted Kate, my fiance. I said, I'm overwhelmed with all the stuff we got to talk about. She said, focus on 2 things. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to listen to her. All right? But I just want to give a little history of how this group started. At the last council, their goal was to do something with short-term rentals, and I'm a resident landlord. My short-term rental sits 35 feet away from me. I also own a couple of year-round homes. I worked very, very hard to attain what I got. Never had a 4-star review. We've been doing this since 2009. People like Rachel and I, we do it right. But at the last hearing, we didn't feel heard. Young woman came up earlier and said that there was a hearing already, that this was vetted, and you're right, there was a hearing. At that hearing, 36 of 40 people were adamantly opposed to the 7-night minimum as well as the licensing. Those were 2 of the biggies that came up. The history a little bit about the 7-night minimum comes from the former council comparing Narragansett to a couple of other coastal communities, 2 of them being Jamestown and Westerly. I'm not going to mention names, but I spoke to that point that the comparison was that they had 30-day minimums, and they did not. That never existed. I mentioned that at a council meeting. I also want to work with the town. I require 7 nights in the summer, like Rachel. That's what the market dictates. But we got to be clear that this 7-night thing, we talk about it as if it's assumed that it's done throughout the state. It's not. No other municipality has a 2-night minimum, let alone a 7. Now, I'm well aware what happens in Newport. Newport has their restrictions, and it's a completely different animal in their zoning areas. But of their legal ones, there's 550 of them, there's a 0-night minimum. Someone said, well, Cumberland banned them all together. My answer to that is, I don't think anyone even cares enough to fight it in Cumberland. Cumberland is not Narragansett. Cumberland is not where people want to be. And maybe they're breaking the law. But the bottom line is the law says and the state says explicitly that we're allowed to advertise on Airbnb and VRBO. Okay? It says nothing about a minimum. So I sat at this microphone and I recommended 7 nights in the summer. It was part of the Crane report. I also suggested that it should be more like 2 or 3 in the off-season at the time. Because again, I am a resident. That's what the market dictates. The other thing I can tell you is we don't have 60 hotels like Newport. We have 3 boutique motels, Mr. Durkin's being one of them, the Shore House, the one on Ocean Road, and Lindsay's cute place, right? I'm not even going to talk about the Village Inn, okay? Another thing we need to think about is the amount of short-term rentals shrinks dramatically in the off-season because a lot of people rent to students and the summer, all right? So this pool of short-term rentals goes down substantially, and I think it's 5% per the Crane report. So the 2 things I want to talk about is, one, we weren't heard in the past. 90% of the people said they were against it. This went to court, and then we now have a frivolous lawsuit. So let's not assume the 7 nights is something that's done. It's not. It's not done anywhere in the state. But I want it here because I want to work with the residents. I'm a firefighter first, then I'm a resident, and now I'm a landlord, okay? Raising a daughter in the school system, right? So the 7 nights is not, let's not assume it. It's something I think we can have, but the summer is not May to October. Let's get that out the window. The summer season is the middle of June to Labor Day. Those are that's the 7-night minimum window. When the kids get out of school to Labor Day. Because if you take away the spring and the fall, you're taking away weddings, the art festival, URI graduation, Calamari Festival, the times when the delight of the visitors is to come here for 2 or 3 nights. So I just want to be clear. Let's not assume 7 nights is something that happens across the board. It happens nowhere in the state of Rhode Island, nowhere, okay? But I'm all for it because I want to, again, come up with something that we can work together on. Just bear with me here. I feel like I'm on the captain's test over here with the panel in front of me. Safety. I was the health and safety officer for this town, for the fire department, for 15 years. I encourage inspections. I think that short-term rentals are a bit different than year-round rentals. I have both of them. I go to my year-round rental and I tell them, this is where the extinguishers are. These are the means of egress. They all know who's in that house on a daily basis, and they do that. I go there once a year. When you have, let's call it 10 weeks in the summer, 10 different families, I just want you to picture going to Block Island. I go with a group of 3 different families. Excuse me. 1 o'clock in the morning on some night, I don't know where one of the couples is. They could be at, they could be dancing at Kittens for all I know. So if something happens, my point is the emergency responders need to know where people are. That's an example of one of the reasons that separates a short-term rental. The other thing, too, is the short-term rental people don't know where the extinguishers are. They don't know the means of egress. They wake up in an emergency. It's different than being in your own home. So it's almost a different class. And I can tell you that the fire marshal has developed, very reasonably, a new class, and that's the short-term rental. All right, so there are new regulations for short-term rentals that the fire marshal has developed. So we need to acknowledge that and acknowledge that these homes need to be inspected. All right, I'm all for it. The permitting process, I can talk more about at another time. But, we want to work. We are residents. We want to work with the residents, but some of the residents need to work with us. I think part of the purview of the past ordinance was to create a burden so bad that it was going to make me do one of three things. It's going to make me sell my house, rent year-round without any incentive, or rent to college students, which you don't want. They don't want students either. So tell me what I'm allowed to do. It's very frustrating because I want to work with the residents, but they have to work with me. Okay? I want to work with them, but they have to work with me. I'm not renting to college students. And I don't want to be bullied into doing anything. I think that's why we're in this lawsuit, because it went too far. And I implore you not to go too far. That's why I'm bringing up these things that we can have a discussion with and work together. But to put a burden on one group with the hopes that one of those three things would happen, actually four things, and I mentioned it at this microphone. They were going to fight it. They were going to rent to college students. They sell the house. Yeah, I'll sell my house for $1.6 million. There's no family coming in and buying my house. And I mean that without everybody's house is worth that much, okay? And I gave my word to my neighbors. And my neighbors wrote letters on my behalf in order for me to attain the properties that I have. I gave my word that I wouldn't rent to college students. And I'm not doing it. I like the delight of seeing families have a good time in something that I created. That's what I like. I like that better. All right? And if someone has an issue with a house with 13 people in it, then fix it. Then enforce it. All right? I'm all about the regulation. And that brings me to, sorry, Kate, this is the third part. Enforcement. None of this works without enforcing it. I am sickened over the bad landlords, frankly. And it's not to say that an out-of-state landlord can't hire someone or have someone like Rachel or myself managing their properties. But enforcement is key. I recommended the current compliance officer that we have. I sat at the State House. Mr. Durkin was there, and I recommended that this should be mandated in every town in the state. Our rental compliance officer is great, but I don't want to hear parking, trash, noise. Hire someone else. We have 26 community service officers, 26 walking around town, and this is not against the chief of the police chief, but there's 26 of them. If our rental compliance officer needs help this summer, or even segueing into the fall when the natives get restless, when the college kids get back for 6 months, then hire them. Because we need to enforce these regulations or it means nothing. We need to enforce the parking, the trash, the noise, all that. We'll get to the parking. I have an answer for that as well. We'll get to the noise. We'll get to all that. But I'm done, Kate. That's 3. If any one of you have any questions about how I run my property, how I attain my properties, how I vet my tenants, anything at all, feel free to ask. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public wish to come forward and speak on really, I mean, the floor is wide open, so anything to do with the short-term rental ordinance, maybe some feedback that has come to mind of what you would like to see in a new ordinance, or even reflections on the first community discussion. Yes, Rupert. Good evening.
Good evening, council members.
see you.
Rupert Friday, 113 Montauk Road. As I think all of you know, I attended the forum. And I think what I came away from the forum with, having the discussions at Five Tables, is I think there's an opportunity for consensus on an awful lot of what's in the short-term rental ordinance. And I think I would encourage you either to have a similar forum with a facilitator to build consensus, either ideally a facilitator at each table. You could identify here's where there's consensus, here's where there's not consensus, and maybe create a work group. And I guess where I thought there was consensus was between the residents and the rental property owners that live in town, like Joe. I think I heard an awful lot of consensus about what would work in the ordinance. And I think if you created an advisory group with folks from the town, both the rental property owners that live here and the residents, where there is not agreement, I think you could have a rich discussion to build consensus about a lot of things. The discussion tonight's been about the 7-day issue. I think there's some strategies that could be there, but you can't discuss strategies in a forum like this. It really needs to be around a table with a give and take among those groups. And then if you haven't read the Crane report yet, I really encourage you to look at that. I think it's important. It has 2 recommendations related. The Crane report for affordable housing, for those that aren't familiar with it, has 2 recommendations related to this. One, as Mr. Volpe said, the 7-day rental period, and the other is encouraging landlords to rent on a year-round basis. I think there's some strategies for dealing with the 7 days that address the issues that Joe and others have raised, but you can't work them out in a forum like this. You really need to work them out in a discussion with those stakeholders working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Maureen Barney. I live at 146 Knowles Way Extension. And I have a rental property 1 street over. I just feel that when I bought that home, the rental property, of course I live 1 street away, so of course I was concerned about taking care of the property and my neighbors, and my daughter happens to own the house next door. It was in disrepair. It was just a mess. So I beautified the street and brought all of the property values up on that street by replacing the roof, replacing the windows, putting in a new heating system. The home I live in now, which is my permanent residence, was my summer residence from 1984 to 2018, at which time I demolished it and built a new home on the same property. And it's a lot of substandard size. So it's not one of these behemoth homes you see on a small lot. As such, the rental home is a small ranch. The bedroom size of 70 square feet is only allowed for one person, and it has to be 120 in order to accommodate 2 people, I think is unreasonable. A lot of these homes, older homes, I think it was built in 1954, I think the bedroom is about 8.5 by 11. I have a double bed in it. It has a closet, of course, because it's a bedroom. It has a bureau. It has 2 nightstands. And yet, under this regulation, I would only be able to have 1 person in that room. That doesn't make sense to me, because you've got a minimum for 2 people of 120 square feet. a lot of the homes have bedrooms much smaller than 120 square feet, and they're accommodating, it accommodates a double bed. So 2 people can sleep in a double bed. The other one that concerns me a little bit is the parking. A 10 by 20 for 2 cars, I believe you're saying. I think that's a little bit of an overreach, too. I have a driveway that accommodates 2 cars. Whether or not it's 10 feet wide, I'm not completely sure. I think I had it redone last summer to comply with these regulations, and I believe I did it because of this regulation. But maybe not everyone can do that. And before it was just stone, but now I've, cleaned it up a bit. So I'm a great, like the people before me, I'm a great landlord. I do rent to students, but only 2 students. I do rent in the summer, and I do have a 7-day minimum. But in May and June, I agree that that 7-day minimum should be brought down a bit to, even 3. I don't rent less than 3 days because I clean my own homes. And I'm not going to be doing that every other day. So those are just some, the fees I think are exorbitant. $400, I had, what was it, 50 to fill out the application and $350. A lot of us are residents right in town, and we're doing this, we have been fortunate enough and worked hard enough to be able to afford a second property, and I almost feel like we're being penalized for being good landlords. I would say if the enforcement part is big, if you've got people who are causing problems in their neighborhoods, then go after those people, but leave me alone. I'm doing a great job. Everyone on my street is pleased. And we've brought up the neighborhood. So it's just something to consider because we feel like we're really being made scapegoats for some reason when we're only doing good things for the community and the housing. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. I saw Mr. Frandy's hand first, and then we'll come to you. Yes.
Good evening, council members, and thank you. I got here a little bit
just
late.
name and...
I'm sorry, Stephen Ferrandi, 44 Sylvan Road.
Thank you.
Narragansett, should know that by now. I got here a little bit late, so I just have one kind of point of order. I see Mr. Durkin sitting in the chamber, and Mr. Menzies, did he officially recuse himself for this meeting? Or did he notify the town? I don't see a solicitor here, so I don't know if they were here to, require that, or...
I can't speak on behalf of Mr. Durkin. His business is his own, but in my personal discussions with the Board of Ethics was that there was no violation of anyone who has any perceived ethics violation for them to be sitting in the audience, and there is no vote being taken tonight. It was my recommendation that Mr. Durkin sit out into the audience, but again, it was his own decision at the end of the day.
Okay, so it's not an official...
It's not an official recusal.
Even though last time it was. He officially said he was, solicitor said he would have to recuse. Okay, thank you. There's so much to say about this ordinance, but I'd like to reiterate the point that there was a lot of data already gone over for this, and I realize that there's a few sticking points. I can understand that, even in some of the meetings we had. But we did have, and this ordinance itself had actually become public 4 different times in the last 6 months before it was produced. You can look at every iteration. They're basically all about the same. And it actually was vetted out by the town. government. There was even a fact sheet. You know, I know there's a lot of people about the size of bedrooms, the size of this, but a lot of what is in there has to go by the state law. You know, a 10 by 7 bedroom is a minimum amount of bedroom you can have according to the state, and we're trying to follow that. And you need 120 for 2 people in there. That's not the town doing this, that's the state. So, you know, there's a lot of good answers in there, and I know when we were discussing it before, we had a pause, people could come in and ask questions, and it generated a bunch of questions that the building inspector, Mr. Pimentel, had put on the website about answers. And it went about a lot of the technical things, even if I do a short term, do I have to do a regular rental registration list? So all of those things were kind of vetted out. There's information on all that already. Now, it never came to light because, you know, lo and behold, and I'm glad that you reconsidered and just didn't line out a whole ordinance and make it, you know, to be honest with you, very immature as a new council and very disrespectful for the towns. Now, cooler heads have prevailed here, so now we've got a chance to vet this a little bit. According to your guys' rules, you know, you went through the work session, that's what you're finding out. But, you know, Granicus did give us a whole information packet on this. And at the time, there was 1,100 unique short-term rentals. There was, you know, about 94% were single-family units. It gave us the whole rundown. $520 a night per bedroom was the highest rate in the state at the time. So, you know, and the discussions were that people gave their, we got it in, and then we gave what we thought each council person sent into the town manager along with the solicitor. They crafted this ordinance. And, you know, one of the issues is about the limits, but if there is no limits, where it grows unabatably. That's a question to be discussed and talked about. You know, as far as the amount, there was information that I received in the reports I got that's where I was at with the amount that was there, and probably other council people. So I just want to just reiterate, there's a lot of good information already in here. A lot's been vetted out, you know, and there's talk about, you know, there's not enough hotel rooms. Well, you know, you can look at one of these things, and you can look at these 1,100 short-term rentals now, and basically, you can call them mini boutique hotels in the neighborhood, because that's how they act, and they're a business. And I get it, I understand, there's nothing wrong with people making money, and, you know, maybe the people that have properties now, that live in town, a lot of them feel that they, you know, they're part of the community, and I understand all of that, but they're basically, everybody's looking at this like a business. And that's what they are. And they're not taxed that way. That's a whole nother talk. So I just wanted to bring that up. And a lot of what's said has been vetted out, could be answered, you know, but when you start off with lining a whole ordinance and then you went your own way with your own mediator, which wasn't hired by the town, which was someone that Ms. Vignali knew, you know, how can it really be an official record of this town? That's not how it operates. Just if you're going to do something like that, you should be putting it out to bid and act like the council should be acting. Be a little more formal. Do your diligence. You know, don't get influenced by one member or 2 members, say because of the, you know, you heard people. I mean, you would think you heard every person you talked to on the campaign trail was against the short-term rental ordinance. A lot of people probably had no opinion on it. So anyway, that's all. You know, give it a pause like you've done. I realize I'm not completely, you know, the information's for what it's worth. It's who shows up at the meeting. But, you know, you guys have to dig in deep on this, like the rest of these councils did, and understand it. Understand that there was a lot of information. It was vetted through the town. People have their opinions, you know, and be reasonable about it. Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Appreciate it. Oh, one other question. Are we going to see, I just hope there's not there'll be a blue sheet with all the changes on this, and then a public hearing to say, okay, this is an up or down, or, you know.
There's going to be another, so the plan is at a later meeting, a regularly scheduled meeting, there will ideally be an agenda item, a discussion scheduling to plan another work session or community discussion.
Yeah, because it's, you know, you're running on time also, you know, with the seasonal rentals. I mean, the rental registration, and the rental registration starts in September, so, the
Right.
time's ticking as far as to get
Yep.
something going. If it's similar to this, the town has already vetted out, they
course.
vetted out the inspections, then you get of what the house is, it's just putting a blueprint on something that we have the most in the whole state. It's only right that this is done. Thank you.
Thank you. And I saw this young lady next. Thank you. No, 1 second. Okay. Sorry.
So I don't know why there's any confusion, but I am recusing myself, so.
Yeah, I think it was
I
just
do- I do
the
have
matter
to-
of an official recusal, I think was the question.
Well, it's official now.
Okay,
And then,
thank you.
I have the right to sit in the
Yes.
audience.
Yes, you do. Thank you. And now please come forward.
Sun's right in my eyes. I'm just
Oh, you can also use this microphone too. That's right.
It's on now. I'm Elizabeth Branca. I live at 60 Central Street. I wasn't originally going to speak, but I'm a resident, and I don't own any rental properties here, so I feel like I'm representing the non-landlord population a little bit. I do think there's a big difference in between resident landlords and non-resident landlords. The people who have spoken here who are resident landlords, I know they're part of this community, and they spoke very passionately about maintaining their properties and being a good neighbor. And I don't doubt that that's true. I think it's very different when it's non-resident landlords. I've had those landlords in my neighborhood before, not anymore so much. And I just would like there to be an awareness. Obviously, there are people who want to buy these properties who are not community members. I get phone calls or texts all the time, people interested in buying my house. I had a guest come visit me last fall, and she lives in California, and has an investment group, and she's like, what do you think if we come in and buy one of the houses here as an investment property? I'm like, no, please do not do that. So people do want to come in. You've got companies like Blackstone that now own, I think, 1/3 the third largest single home residential in the rental market, houses. So these big companies are buying up homes. So I think, the people who are here speaking passionately, who are landlords, they're one thing, but then we have to be cognizant of whatever law we pass, that we're not going to somehow open the floodgates to other people coming in, buying up properties, non-residents, and then, we have a lot of non-resident landlords, which, as a resident, I would rather not have. That's all I wanted to say. And also, I wasn't able to be here at the last workshop, so I hope I can participate in the next one. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yes, please come forward.
Is this on? Hi,
Hello.
Lisa Beth Sanford, a non-resident landlord. I live in South Kingstown. It's my house that I own on 9 Desana Drive is closer to me than somebody who lives in Bonnet Shores. That's 5.1 miles from Bonnet Shores. I'm 4 miles from the house. I also know, along with a lot of non-resident landlords, we know our neighbors. We know the people who are in our house. We vet them as much as resident landlords, and we look after our properties as much. It's specific people who don't. But please do not put us all in one bucket. Number one. Number two, we care about this town. As I said, I'm in South Kingstown. I come to lots of events. I love the bands at the gazebo. I go out to dine here all the time. This is a sister town. With that being said, I do believe that there's lots of other non-resident landlords who feel like this is their home also. They can't be here all the time. They do hire people like Mr. Durkin to take care of their places and be their mouthpieces and be there for them. This ordinance overall has some really good things about it, and then there are some overwhelming things. So, and it's person by person. So please keep working, keep listening to all of us. We are all taxpayers. We all love this town. So please, I love the transparency that you guys have had. I wasn't able to get to the previous workshop, but I will make it a point to attend the other ones. And if you only hold them in the winter, then many non-resident landlords cannot be heard. And one of the reasons why we're here doing this is because we were not heard. I thank you all for keeping the open communication.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too. Anyone else? Yes, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Dave Kegels, at 85 Kenyon Farms Road. I did attend the recent workshop. I thought it was very useful. I want to make it clear that that house is a rental, and I'm here, opposing the ordinance as written anyway. But I got a chance to hear what a lot of the complaints were about short-term rentals at that workshop from residents who were concerned about it, and it seemed that there was a lot of consensus that there are real problem properties, problem landlords that are really the biggest problem, and enforcement against those is really what's the most critical thing. That's what was my biggest takeaway from it. But I want to address a few points that were brought up by various people earlier. One of them is that since a lot of work went into this ordinance, we should keep it as is because it was vetted and there was a lot of work put into it. Well, a lot of work was put into making it very specifically targeted against short-term rentals and to significantly limit them. It wasn't, it was heavily biased and it wasn't just some balanced process. So just because a lot of work went into it doesn't mean we should just keep it wholesale. And the notion that it was really well vetted, well then why is it held up in court now? I mean, there are clearly things wrong with it. It needs to be fixed. I want to address the issue of occupancy limits and room size. The room size is also an issue for us. A lot of our cottages, I should just say that my family's owned property here in Narragansett for like a century, and it's been rented out as short-term rentals for that entire time, a lot of those cottages. We have a long history here, and some of us are residents full-time and others are not. Some are out of state. But these old cottages, a lot of their rooms don't meet the requirements. My understanding is that the requirements, the current requirements, 70 square feet for one and 120 square feet for two, that are outside of just what this ordinance says, are for new construction specifically. Like you can't build a new house that has rooms that are too small. But it doesn't mean that suddenly those rooms are illegal in all the houses that have already been built. So that just doesn't make any sense. You need to grandfather the older houses, these old small cottages, for their room size. And I think not only that, but it should go beyond just the bedrooms and how large they are. For example, the cottage at 85 Kenyon Farms Road has been advertised for ages. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and it's been advertised as sleeps 4 in bedrooms and 2 on a pull-out sofa in a common area. So it's advertised as privacy for 4, sleep 6. And it's often rented just to 2 or 4 people, but a lot of times there are families that come and want to stay there with a few kids, and it's fine, and they're not bothering anybody. So even just going by even if it met the room size requirements, not being able to even have anyone in a common area is a problem. I think there should be some allowance for that as well. I think it's utterly ridiculous to have 17 people in a small house, and especially with big parties. That's a real problem. We need to stop that. But a cottage that has plenty of safe space for even 6 people in a relatively small space, they should be allowed to do it. If it's safe and there's egress, et cetera, that needs to be considered. If we can't list it on, say, Airbnb for as sleeping 6, and someone goes to search on there with their family, they want to bring 4 kids, they're not even going to find the cottage. It's not going to show up in the results. It's not going to be an option. They're not going to say, well, I guess I'm okay with putting a couple of kids on a sleeper sofa, because the option won't even be presented to them. So we need to be able to advertise it that way. Another point that was brought up earlier, and this is a minor point, but I just want you to understand, this notion that there's this self-selection bias in the survey results, right? Yeah, I suppose that's true. People decide they want to respond to the survey or they don't. But the notion that that means that it's going to have mostly positive feedback is nonsense, because a lot of people that are motivated to respond to surveys are people who are upset and angry and like reviews online. Lots of them are terrible reviews. It's not like people are only motivated to leave positive feedback. So that doesn't make any sense. Just wanted to point that out. And I want to say that I am a non-resident, not even in state. My primary residence is in Florida, and before that, in other states, and I grew up in Connecticut. But I grew up spending a lot of the time in the summer and pre- and post-season working on the cottages, and I get here a few months a year, take care of the property. I feel like I'm part of the community, and it's just depressing, really, to hear some of the sentiment against just generalizing people that are out of state is just necessarily being bad. I understand that there are definitely some out-of-state landlords that are a problem and that don't care about their properties and don't care what happens because they're not there. And that needs to be taken care of with enforcement and various measures. But the general, sentiment against people who are out of state or just don't even live in Narragansett is it's just wrong. We're not the enemy. And just there's a point here. This really stuck out to me when I was reading through this earlier today. All these points that were left on the paper. And there's one here that says, residents should be paying a lot less than stated as they are already paying taxes. Right? Somebody said that. Now let's think about that for a minute. There's various kinds of taxes that people are paying, whether residents or non-residents. One of them is property taxes. Now, obviously, it's the same, property taxes. Non-residents are paying property taxes, so what's the point here? State income taxes. If anybody's making a profit on the property here in Rhode Island, in Narragansett, they're going to owe the state of Rhode Island income taxes on the profit from that property, because that's the state it's in, even if they live out of state. So they're paying state income taxes just like the residents would on it. And they're also paying state sales tax, because most things that are purchased to go, for the property, construction materials, furniture, whatever else, is mostly going to be purchased in state, in Rhode Island, for properties in Narragansett. So this notion that there's a difference in the taxes that residents and non-residents are paying is just silly. It doesn't make sense. But that's the kind of argument that's being used against non-residents. So I just want to keep that in mind, that there aren't really good arguments to penalize non-residents, to charge them exorbitant fees, higher fees, and treat them as second-class citizens, or really not citizens at all, since they don't get to vote. So I just want you to keep that in mind. That's most of the points I wanted to make, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak who hasn't spoken already? Yes, please come forward.
How y'all doing? I don't have any strong opinions on this, actually. I was listening at home, and this is about money.
Oh, sorry, just name and address.
Oh, Paul Zonfrillo, 7 Windward Circle.
Thank you.
So this is about money. Plain and simple. The people coming up here, and, I love the sob stories. Oh, I love the community. Oh, I fixed the roof on my house. I mean, on average, and I'll have some data to back this up, people make between $50,000 and $100,000 a year cash flow on these properties. So there's a tremendous amount of money that's made. They also make money through depreciation and write-offs on their taxes. And if you're not making that kind of money, then, I don't know how you run your business. But they are businesses. And they have unlimited upside. And when you're an entrepreneur, right, in order to get that upside, there's got to be risks. So I don't blame them to come in here and complain about every single rule and regulation. I don't blame the people that come in here and try and protect their generational wealth. It really doesn't matter how many years you've been renting, or if you grew up renting cottages, or whatever your story is. The bottom line is people are making money. Some are grinding it out, making money. Some are really raking it in and are well organized. And the thing is that it's really the question of what kind of town do we want to have? And, people keep talking about, back in the day, it was so different. When I was a kid and people rented down here, you sent your check in January. You rented for at least 2 weeks. And then, you showed up and that was it. You can't really compare the past to what's going on right now, because you've turned every single house in this town potentially into a hotel. And, I heard a lot about, first communions and all these other things that people are coming in for and renting. I mean, they can stay in South Kingston. There's places to stay, right? So when is going to be enough enough? When is it going to be, because it really is about the money. And what feels to me is like you're reaching for compromise, right? You're looking for compromise, but some things you can't compromise on. What if you wanted to, let's say someone said, you know what, the property on Narragansett Town Beach is very valuable. Why don't we sell it to developers and build condos? We get a ton of money for the town, right? I mean, beautiful waterfront views. Can make a ton of money for the town. Why don't we just change the whole beach over to condos? Well, that's ridiculous, right? But maybe we only make them half condos. Half condos, like we're splitting in the middle. We're cutting the baby in half, right? And so some things you can't meet in the middle on, right? And if things keep going like they're going right now, all the residents will be driven out of this town. And I heard a lot of comparisons to other towns, right? Name another town that's like this in Rhode Island. Name a town where, let's talk about academic rentals in Providence, okay? My brother went to Brown University a long time ago. He had to live at school. He's on the east side of Providence. He had to rent that house for the whole year, for the whole 12 months. Because there's now it's probably different nowadays, right? Because they would Airbnb it in the summer. But back 25 years ago, right, you couldn't do anything with those months. Now Providence is having an Airbnb crisis, right? So what's unique in Narragansett is you can make as much money in the academic part of the year as you can in the summer. So it's like having 2 years pushed into one.
It sounds like you're focusing on archiving during the academic.
Sorry about that.
If you're dealing with academic websites or resources, make sure to regularly check and submit updates, especially.
It's Grok. Now you have AI weighing in, so really, all this workshop was, people maybe felt that they were being heard, right? But it's really up to you to decide if you want to build condos on the beach or half the beach or none of the beach. It's really up to you to decide what kind of town we want to have, because the residents are always going to tell you that it's out of control, and the landlords will never say that there's too little regulation, right? They're always going to complain about the regulation. They're always going to complain no matter what you do. So you really have to decide what kind of town you want to have. It doesn't matter how long somebody's lived here. It doesn't matter how long they've rented. It Doesn't matter if they're a good landlord or a bad landlord, really. What matters is what do you want the town to look like? And are we going to continue to empty the schools? Are we going to continue to have, neighborhoods deteriorate and fall apart? And it'll be the last one, turn the lights off when you leave Narragansett. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet this evening who wishes to do so? Yes, Mr. Pugh. Good evening.
Hello, Jesse Pugh, 40 Birchwood Drive, Narragansett. I'll just start by thanking the council for their vote a few months ago and for holding the workshop as you guys said you would do. And then again for doing this tonight, and it sounds like future meetings as well, so appreciate the process. I was at the workshop at the community center. I agree with what has been said by most people, which is that it was productive. There was definitely a lot of common ground, in my opinion, at least in the discussions. I don't know if that common ground continued when people left, but those discussions were, I think, open-minded. I think there was compromise, and it did seem like on issues that felt like maybe there wouldn't be the ability to do that, there was. So that was great. As a few people have said, it's hard to gauge the overall sentiment of that night because what we have here is kind of a collection of all answers. It doesn't say how many people said certain things. It doesn't say, give you that volume. But it's a great list for you guys to have and to work off of. So now you have the questions, you have the feedback, and you can use that in whatever way, makes sense for you. But I'm not going to get into the details of the ordinances or of the ordinance. I think a few people have already spoken in detail about that. But I do want to talk about one specific thing in it. And I think a good question that you guys can ask yourselves, and I've asked myself, is what's the ultimate goal in whatever you put together and what you pass? What are you really looking to achieve? So is it to make short-term rentals safer and maybe less rowdy and more controllable, but still exist and continue to grow? Is that the goal? So they're less of a nuisance to the neighborhood, but that they're still there? Or is it to generate revenue for the town? So is it about fining and registration fees and using that revenue for whatever you deem maybe affordable housing or whatever other projects that would be possible? Is that the goal? Or is it to stop the future conversion of single-family homes and year-round homes to becoming short-term rentals? Is that the goal? So to me, that's a very easy question or easy answer, and that is to stop the conversion of houses to new short-term rentals, because when that happens, now you have a house off the market that could have been a year-round rental. It could have been purchased by someone as a year-round home. And once that happens, it's probably gone for at least a long time, because then if it does sell, it's been proven out that it works as short-term rental. The next buyer does the same thing. So how do you do that? And of all the different restrictions and requirements in this ordinance, there's one single thing, in my opinion, that does that, and that is having a cap. So what that cap does is, it depends how it's implemented. And I think there are issues with the way it's implemented in this ordinance that I don't know if they were fully thought out or if it was intentional, but there are some issues, I believe, with the current cap. But so things like if you register your short-term rental, you're not guaranteed to have it in the next season, which you can't, that's not realistic, clearly, because people need that stability. So I don't think you're being genuine if you do the cap in that way. But if you have it so that once you're, anyone who's registered now, anyone who's on the list now, would be grandfathered in to have that rental. Once they give that up, once they sell the house, once they don't register, now they're off the list. To me, that's a compromise. I know probably some people won't like it on each side. Some people are going to say, we want to get these numbers down. I don't want to grandfather in. Some owners are going to say, I want to buy future properties and increase the size of my portfolio. But what it does do is, I believe it respects those who spoke tonight about their rentals that they have. They could continue doing that. It would limit your ability to increase your holdings, but it also accomplishes the goal on the other side, which is to stop what we've been seeing over the last few decades, which is more and more houses going on the market and turning into short-term rentals. And we've seen it in all neighborhoods. I know there's 3 houses for sale in my neighborhood in the North End right now, and you talk to your neighbors, and there is really no hope that those are going to be families moving in, because the profit and the possibilities as a short-term rental are just too high. You can't blame anyone for wanting to do it. So unless there is not that ability, which is having a cap, then the house can't be marketed that way when it's being sold. It could be marketed that way, but if anyone does their research, they'll know that they can't rent that out until there's room on the list. So again, without that cap, I don't see any reason to talk about the future of the schools. I don't see any reason to talk about building and improving playgrounds, because you're not going to have that community here to use those facilities as we lose our housing inventory. So again, there are definitely tweaks that could be done to the ordinance across the board. There are things like possibilities for owner-occupied. You have your minimum nights, you have parking, you have all of that. And those are things that I think this council can work on and figure out. But again, if you don't move forward with a cap, then what we'll have is neat and tidy, quiet Airbnbs throughout the neighborhoods and less families. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Lawler.
Good evening, everybody. Jill Lawler, Sarasota Avenue, and I'm going to be as brief as I possibly can because I've already been here for a bit of time. I also did attend, and thank you for having that. I did note that the majority of people that were there that I spoke with were not town residents, and I know that the advertisement was looking to have a best solution for all residents. So I do agree, including the individuals who spoke this evening, the resident landlords. So as being one of the crafters from the ordinance itself, I just wanted to kind of make a few statements about how it was crafted and why it was crafted. It was the first time I ever actually developed a zoning law. I don't think any of you have either. We worked very much with Jim and with Wayne and with the police chief, and just try to come up with how best can we do this, because we know one thing with any ordinance, it's easier to dial back than to add on. Easier to dial back than to add on. So I know that we heard tonight, and I remember hearing from when I sat up there, that a lot of people didn't feel like they were heard. Well, being heard and agreeing with a product are two different things. You were heard, and we always had anticipated dialing back on this, and I'm sure you guys are going to be doing that now, with whatever council is here. But the one thing that I really want to stress for you guys to think about is this. Why did the last two councils, the one that Jesse was the president of one and the one that Eva was the president of one, why did they seek to put short-term rental ordinances into effect? It was to do just what Jesse just said, is to find out a cap, to be able to put a stop to the amount of homes that go into not year-round housing, but into a short-term rental properties. Now, I know you don't know right now how many short-term properties are in town. We don't have that answer. That's something that you guys really need to be able to get your arms around. Because until you have that answer, there's no need to even make tweaks to this ordinance. That needs to be impactful. I read in the front page of the newspaper not long ago, Mr. Menzies, Mr. Colonnese, you were both quoted as saying, absolutely no, would you have any interest in wanting to regionalize the school system? And I agree with you. However, if we continue down this road, you're not going to have any choice. Mr. Colonnese, I know you have young kids. They might not be graduating from Narragansett High School unless we actually make some choices, and you, as the leaders of the town, make some really bold choices. I know there are people here that spoke that they are property owners that are not living in the town. But I think we all can agree on one thing, that the people that do live here are part of our community, and they have a more invested interest in making sure the community and the neighborhoods are whole. Short-term rentals are neighborhood killers. We know this. We just need to find out how many short-term rentals are in town, cap it, so that we can make sure that we don't regionalize the school systems. Because I agree with what Jesse just said. There's no need for us to talk about not putting money in pickleball courts and putting them in playgrounds if we're not going to have kids to be on the playgrounds. So I think this is going to be the biggest thing that you guys do. Again, the last two councils we tried. And yes, there is a stay in court right now, but that is from a bunch of individuals who are not the individuals who spoke here tonight. They are the people that from out of state, out of town, 2,100, that tend to actually want to wait as soon as we leave the podium to file a lawsuit. So that's why there's a stay. So please make some changes to this. It's very important. Again, we just need to make sure we can keep the children in this town and not have it just be a neighborhood for rentals. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak who hasn't done so already? Speak now. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. There was a lot of, I think, really great feedback shared, and I will allow the council to have one final comment or thought if they so choose. But, you know, I think the overall theme here is to, you know, reflect, reevaluate, and work to find solutions that work for all residents moving forward, because there's a lot of themes that were covered tonight, but compromise, it does seem attainable. And, you know, again, part of the reason why I voted the way that I did was I truly believed in the fact that we could find compromise as a community, and that has not wavered. I really appreciate hearing multiple different perspectives, residents, non-residents, resident landlords, non-resident landlords. And I agree that, you know, there are different viewpoints that really need to be taken into consideration, and I really feel like we can do that at future community workshops and discussions. So my recommendation will be at a later town council meeting, somewhere down the road, either this month or the next, we will put it on for the agenda to schedule and discuss an additional work session, workshop, what that would look like at that time. There's a lot of information that was shared here this evening. I think there's a lot of information that this council can digest. And it's really a matter of how do we move forward and use the work or everything that's been shared here, not only in the workshop, but everything that's been shared in the community discussion as well. So I don't know if any council members have any final thoughts.
I'd just like to thank everyone who came forward tonight, everyone who sent emails and have expressed their opinions and had their input. I read each one of them, and I will take all this into consideration, and I think it's wonderful that we are having discussions and we're hearing from different segments of the residents and the population, and so I appreciate all that, and I'd like to thank everyone, so thank you.
And please continue to reach out to any member on the town council, to Jim Tierney directly, with any questions, concerns, any commentary. If you were not able to be here this evening and have feedback on this community discussion, or have any thoughts on how we could improve the ordinance moving forward as well, please share your feedback with us, because we are listening and we do want to hear as many points of view as possible, because this is for the town and we want it to work. With that being said, have a great evening.